Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. For those of you who don't know me, I am Jennifer Teichman. I am an associate professor of psychology here at Lakeland Community College. I'm just so glad that you're able to join us today on this very chilly day, which is a reminder that A, we live in Northeast Ohio, and B, that it is November, and C, that winter is right around the corner, right? We're here today to talk about such a crucial topic. Addiction, including the opiate epidemic, impacts every one of us because we are all members of society. Since the start of the pandemic, we have seen a significant increase in substance use, and that's from a rate that was already alarmingly high. While many of us may feel powerless in the ongoing battle against addiction, there are things within our control which we can do to have a positive impact on our community, including the following. Number one, we can educate ourselves about addiction. Number two, we can have open dialogue about mental health issues, thereby helping to reduce the stigma and shame often linked to addiction. And number three, we can support each other, including those who struggle with addiction. Today's event will contribute to each of the actions that I just listed. A primary intent is that this discussion functions as a source of inspiration, which provides a sense of hope. One of my hopes is that today's event encourages you to not shy away from future dialogue about addiction, to have ongoing conversations. With Thanksgiving quickly approaching, it is a time when we tend to become especially aware of our gratitude. And I am thankful that we have 3 speakers from our community who are passionate about spreading their messages. Sandra Tenku is the Community Outreach Specialist at the Lake County Adams Board, which stands for Alcohol, Drug Addiction, and Mental Health Services. And I know she'll tell you more about the services they provide. She has been working in the field of behavioral and social services for 15 years. She coordinates and leads the Lake County Suicide Prevention Coalition, the Trauma Response Team, and the Community Alliance of Law Enforcement and Mental Health Services Committee. Before coming to the Adams Board, she was the Director of Housing Services at Extended Housing. Prior to Extended Housing, Sandra worked with people with behavioral health issues who were homeless and victims of domestic violence. She is a certified trainer in mental health first aid, QPR, which stands for Question, Persuade, Refer, a suicide prevention training, signs of suicide, and is trained in a number of other evidence-based programs. Sandra loves to be active and enjoys being outside every chance she can get. And so we welcome you, Sandra. Thank you.
All right, thanks everyone. Thank you, Jen, I appreciate that. Like she said, I'm Sandra Tenku, the Lake County Adams Board. And Adams Board stands for Alcohol, Drug Addiction, and Mental Health Services. There's one of us in every county in Ohio, and we're here by Ohio statute. And what we do is we evaluate, plan, fund, and monitor behavioral health services here in Lake County. So that means from year to year, the services provided may look a little different because we're constantly evaluating, we're constantly monitoring and trying to figure out what is best for here in our community. So something I really like to talk about and to really make sure folks understand is that we cannot talk about wellness without talking about behavioral health. We are one body, we are one person, we have one functioning brain, and we know our physical health has a direct impact on our mental and emotional health, and same for our emotional and mental health has a direct impact on our physical health. So we need to start thinking about the two as wellness together. And so going on about substance use disorders. We know that 1 in 7 adults will experience a substance use disorder. but only 10% of them will actually receive treatment. That's a super low number. And it's because of stigma. I'm sorry, keep looking back, waiting for the animations. No one gets uncomfortable talking about diabetes. No one gets uncomfortable talking about their sprained ankle. But we don't like to talk about behavioral health and our symptoms and what we're experiencing and the hard, difficult times we're going through. Which is kind of wild, because we know that substance use disorder is a chronic disease. And that means it's treatable. We know that 14 people in Ohio today will die of an overdose. And we also know that up to 50% of folks with a mental health disability also have a substance use disorder. We know that at least 1 in 5 teens say they know someone abusing prescription medications. And I just like to point out, this number is probably much higher, because how many teenagers do you know are going to openly admit to adult taking a national survey who they know is or isn't using drugs, especially prescription drugs? So we can bet that this number is actually higher. And moving on to the opiate epidemic. I know sometimes folks like to say, oh, it's not happening here. It's not happening here in Lake County, or it's not happening in this part of Lake County. Opiates and opioids and heroin and meth, that's not happening here. Well, it is. It is happening everywhere throughout Lake County. It's happening in all the townships and all the cities, in every single place. So we need to stop thinking that it's only happening over there. It's not happening here. It is happening everywhere. It's affecting our loved ones, our family, friends, coworkers, and acquaintances. So first, a little basics. And I'm sorry, usually I'm much used to being closer to the screen, so I apologize if I wander away. So opiates. Opiates is a poppy flower. That's our heroin. Opioids, those are Percocets. Those are the man-made substances, right? But the two have the same effects: hypotension, respiratory depression, sedation, pain relief, and that all-time euphoria, right? That's what people really get from them, the euphoric feeling. And then we have fentanyl. Fentanyl is 50 to 100 times more powerful than heroin. I like to say, so folks have some sort of understanding of what fentanyl is and how strong it is. I had an epidural when I had my baby girl. That's what they put in my epidural. They put fentanyl in it. They used controlled amounts from a doctor, making me feel like a whole new woman after all that time. But people are cutting this into all kinds of drugs. They're not just cutting it into heroin. They're not just cutting it into meth. We're seeing it in cocaine. We're seeing it in weed. And what's even more frightening, we're seeing it in weed of those vape pens, right? Those THC vape pens that our kiddos are getting hold of because they're not finding it from safe sources. They're finding it from friends of friends of friends off the streets. Our kiddos in high school and elementary school, they're getting hold of these weed pens that sometimes can be laced with fentanyl. So fentanyl on the timetable. 2014, we find that it's starting to be mixed in with heroin and coke. And then 2014, 2015, we see it's the reason why folks are really overdosing. It is in the street drugs. It is in everything. And then the analogs emerge. And we find that in 2019 through 2021, here in Lake County, 89% of the overdose deaths have fentanyl or a fentanyl analog in them. 89%. That is huge. 89% of the drugs that people are ingesting that they are dying from have fentanyl or a fentanyl analog in them. And what analogs are? They're created, different fentanyl analogs, to avoid classification as illegal policy restrictions on manufacturing and or detection in standard drug tests. AKA, in my words, these are just mutations of fentanyl that folks keep producing, right? That's what it is, basically. So how we got here, we like to do a little history lesson on this part. Not too long ago, end of 1800s, we could go to the corner store, we could go our convenient, We could get cocoa wine, we could get our morphine, we could get our cocaine drips, to make us feel better or get rid of our cold. And that cocoa wine, the Pope at the time, he endorsed it. And let's be real, if the Pope is doing it, of course it's good, right? But then the pendulum swung the other way and Prohibition came. Fast forward a few decades, we're in the 1970s. It's a war on drugs. And while the intention of our country has been good to help folks with substance use disorders, it hasn't been done that well. So again, the war on drugs. Folks, there was a heroin problem back in the 1970s, and rather than helping the people who were on heroin, who had a substance use disorder, they were saying, we're putting a war on you. Because how are you actually supposed to put a war on drugs? You're putting a war on the person using the drugs. And if someone has a disease, you're just putting a war on them and their disease rather than giving them the help that they need. And then just say no. This is my era. This is what I grew up. Just say no to drugs. Well, if I have a disease, like let's say rheumatoid arthritis, and I wake up one day and I'm gonna no, I'm just gonna say no to my rheumatoid arthritis. No, thank you. Well, I can't do that. Diseases don't work that way. Same with a substance use disorder. We know it's a chronic disease. So if I have that, I just can't wake up one day and say, nope, you're done, substance use disorder. I'm saying no to you today. It doesn't always work that way. The 1990s, the incarceration. There was a bill signed. And what happened was, in the 90s when it started out, about 40,000 non-violent offenders were in our prisons. By the time the 90s ended, there were over 200,000 non-violent offenders in prison. Those folks were going to prison for substance use. And again, rather than giving people the help they need, we were sending them off to prison. And we know that folks can still use in our prisons. And as soon as the people got out of prison, whether it be 13 months later, whether it be 7, 9, 10, 11 years later, they were going back to the neighborhood they were. They were going back to the house where they once lived. And they weren't able to get the help that they need. They didn't have the supports around them. They didn't have the treatment put into place. So folks were just going back to what they knew. And then lastly, pain becomes a fifth vital sign. So we would go to the doctor. We still go to the doctor, right? And we get our vital signs checked. I never remember them all. Blood pressure, temperature, maybe oxygen levels, something else. But then in the 2000s, what happened was healthcare facilities were being reimbursed, and this is me simplifying it. Healthcare facilities were being reimbursed by insurance companies based on someone's pain level. So the fifth vital sign became, what's your pain level? And if I were able to prescribe you something or give you something to help with that pain level, we would be reimbursed. And then we know the pill mills started popping up all over Ohio because folks became addicted to Percocet, to other prescription medication. So that's kind of where this all came about, where it started. And to go over how we're responding locally here in Lake County, we have an opiate task force. You know, I have to give credit to my brilliant director because right before the opiate epidemic really hit Ohio, my director was like, we got to get something together because we see this coming down. We need to really tackle this head on and look out for our citizens. So we have the opiate task force who gets together and they put plans and policies in place. We do Operation Resolve. This is when we're really doing a hard outreach to local businesses and companies and talking to them, hey, this is what substance use looks like. This is what can happen, and this is how you can help one another, and there are treatment options available. We're reaching out to folks who overdose. QRT, Quick Response Team. When someone overdoses in our community and they live, what happens is a law enforcement officer in plain clothes with a licensed social worker will go to the place that person overdosed, knock on their door, not do a big rap, but just a nice knock. Hey, we know what happened last week. We care about you. You want help? Do you want any treatment? If so, we can take you right now. If not, great. That's okay too. Here are options available. Because we're coming from a place saying we care about you. Because what I say at the beginning, this is affecting all of us. This is in every neighborhood, this is in every township, every city in Lake County. So we're showing we are a community. We do care about one another. And let us be there for you. We encourage folks to purge your medicine cabinets. And if y'all haven't had this already or haven't heard of it, please, 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 I have information up here on how to contact me. But we have what's called doTERRA pouches at our office building. And what they are, they're little pouches that you can put up to 45 pills in, I think 4 ounces of liquid and 6 patches. And what you do is you put the medication in the bag, you fill it halfway up with water, you close it back up because it's a Ziploc top, and then you toss it. So what happens, the medication, it's no longer working. It deactivates the medication for you. So while you can go to one of the 7 drop-off places in Lake County with your old expired medication, you can also just do it at home and throw it away. Oops. And then we are continually trying to find and enhance our treatment options available here in Lake County. We make sure we have treatment services for everyone, regardless of your age, regardless of your need. We try to make sure there are services available for you. Some examples are Opioid Recovery Transition Program, medication-assisted treatment, residential treatment, recovery housing. I like to bring this up in case folks don't know about it. If I'm in treatment and I complete treatment and I'm feeling good, I'm like, yes. But I can't go back and live with my roommate because they smoke weed every day. And I don't want to fall back into that trap. I need to be around someone who's sober. I can go to recovery housing. I can rent a room at one of the recovery housing places by Lake Geauga Recovery Centers. So I can live with other sober people and I can continue my journey on to recovery. There's aftercare services for folks, and then family supports, because we, like I said before, we are all impacted by this. We have loved ones and friends and coworkers who have substance use disorder. So I might be impacted even if I'm not the one with the disorder. I might have to go to a support group. So we have support groups for family members and for friends. So then REIS is available. Again, anytime you think someone may have overdosed, you call 911 right away. Don't hesitate, call 911. And if the situation is urgent, there's a crisis hotline here in Lake County. Has anyone heard of the crisis hotline? Okay, good. Whew, good. I like to see some hands go up. So the crisis hotline, available 24/7, and what you get when you call is a trained professional who will talk to you. And if it's during certain hours, I believe it's 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. or 9 p.m., there is a mobile crisis team available here in Lake County who will come talk to you out in the community to make sure things are okay. And then there's the crisis text line. This is a national text line that you can use at any time. I do want to say, if you need to speak to someone immediately, make that phone call. But if you need to talk to someone because you're starting to feel a lot of anxiety or starting to feel panic attack coming on, you can go and quietly text this number, 741-741. Whoops. You can text for Hope, but you do not have to. If you text for Hope, it's just telling them that you're texting from Ohio. But it is safe, it is confidential, and there's trained counselors on the other end to speak to you. Then lastly, the Compass line. This is housed at my office space, at our offices. But it is ran by my coworker, who is one of the most compassionate, patient, wonderful people I know. So the Compass line, what it is, it's a navigation line. We want to make sure folks know how to navigate the services here in Lake County. So when you call this number, 440-350-2000, you'll get my coworker, who's a trained triage specialist, and she'll talk to you about your needs. She'll talk to you about what's going on with you, what's happening, whether or not you have insurance, what kind of insurance you do have, and then she's going to let you know these are the services available. Are these cool with you? Do you want to be hooked up with any of them? Yay or nay? If it's yes, she's going to say, cool, let me call them on the line. So she's going to dial that number, and we're going to do a 3-way call. We're going to make sure there's a warm handoff with you and that service provider, because we don't want to just give another name and phone number out to folks who are needing and wanting help. So lastly, that's it. Thank you all so much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed the rest of the presentation.
Thank you, Sandra. So I'd like to introduce our second speaker, Michael Hooper. He is a Smart Recovery spokesman and the State Outreach Director for Ohio. As a recovery of alcoholism and clinical depression, he is a Smart Recovery facilitator and volunteer. Michael is a veteran of the U.S. Army 2nd and 113th 42nd Infantry Division, Operation Enduring Freedom, and thank you for your service. He is co-founder of the Smart Recovery National Veterans and First Responders Forum and online meetings for SMART. And so we welcome you, Michael.
Hear me. So thank you very much for the introduction, Jennifer, and thank you all for coming today. It's a pleasure to be here back at Lakeland. I had the honor of presenting here about a year ago for the Lunch and Learn, and Lakeland's become kind of like the Smart Recovery unofficial alma mater, so it's really good to be back here and to be participating here again for such an important topic. I want to thank Sandra first of all for that wonderful presentation. Some of the things that you mentioned obviously are a recurring theme in the recovery community, but really resonated with me. One of the main ones being stigma. Stigma is something that I see on a daily basis as the outreach director of Smart Recovery, and one of the major challenges we have in bringing resources to communities that may need them. So one of the things that we're going to talk about today, rather than me going into a long spiel about my past, I thought I'd use some of my experiences to teach you all about a lesson in labels and a personal growth within recovery. So I know that's a little hard to read, don't worry about it. I talk a lot, so I'll be able to fill all that in, so don't bother. So just starting out, my addiction journey started very young. At 13 years old, I started using drugs and alcohol, more like most other adolescents and youth, to fit in. I also came from a home that was broken because my parents were divorced by the time I was 11 years old. My first exposure to mental illness was through my home. My father suffered from paranoid schizophrenia and clinical depression. So that was something at a young age I didn't understand. I grew very angry, I grew very defiant towards authority, and I was labeled very early on as a problem child. So by 18 years old, I became a high school dropout, all right? School was something I did not adhere to. I went there, the majority of my school and education experience was trouble. It was trouble, it was degrading, and I did not like it. So I did not adhere to conventional teaching methods, and teachers predicted incarceration within the first 3 years when I dropped out. I actually had a teacher tell me that in the 11th grade. So by 23, they were right. I was arrested for my first DUI, and one of the people that was involved in my correctional process told me I was beginning a promising career in criminality. So by 30 years old, addiction was tied into my daily life. I was working jobs that were directly tied with drinking and alcohol abuse, as well as drug use. And many of the people that were involved in my daily life had me labeled as a drunk or an alkie that they used to call us back in the day. So all of my relationships suffered, personal and family. I got called things like a deadbeat dad because I am a father, user, and soulless was one of the ones that stuck out a lot because I was labeled as someone who just used people and spit them out. A lot of that was due to the fact that I didn't care. I didn't care about other people. I didn't care about myself. So I would get what I wanted from people at any cost, at any second. It doesn't matter what happened with it. By this time, I also suffered with my second DUI, earning that label as repeat offender. All right, and then no introduced to any pathways by this time that were successful in recovery, because like Sandra had alluded to, when I was growing up, the correctional facilities looked at recovery more as a punishment and as a consequence than something to help those that are suffering from addiction. So I was labeled as a repeated offender and somebody who was basically a lost cause, mid-30s, in and out of jail already, working dead-end jobs with no real connection to friends or family that are long-lasting. So by 37 years of age, I reached a point where I started to see the hopelessness in my life for what it was, that there was something in me that still resided that I could be more than what this was presenting. And I reached a level of clarity for an honest desire to change. This was something that had been lacking in me before because I had been told it was not possible to me. For so many people who had labeled me by these proclamations, problem child, criminal career, drunken alkie, and a deadbeat, and soulless, they saw no hope in me. So I started to believe that. So it took a long time before I realized that there was still hope. I just had to feel change. So by that time, I reached out to the VA and I found Smart Recovery. 5 years later, I stand before you as the recovery that I am proud of today. So labels have power, okay? They can be used for good or evil. And I stand by that because I see it every day in the recovery community. So think about that in your daily lives, what labels are common that you deal with on a day-to-day basis, and whether they are used for positive and progressive means or for hindrances and regression in your lifestyle. So let's talk a little bit about what Smart Recovery is, because even though we've been around for a long time, the most common thing I hear about Smart Recovery is, I don't know anything about y'all. It's mostly, everywhere I go is I've heard of Smart and I don't know anything about you, I've never heard of you at all. So I want to talk about what SMART is and how it works a little bit so you have a better understanding of what it's about. So SMART is an acronym. It stands for Self-Management and Recovery Training. All right? It's a transformative method that helps individuals move from a life of addictive substance and negative behaviors to a life of positive self-regard and a willingness to change. So how it works, we use multiple support meetings. We use both the hybrid method of online, in-person, and a combination of both to reach our masses, as well as a wide variety of online and face-to-face services. Our online communities are 24/7, including national and international meetings that are held every day, Monday to Sunday, as well as a 24-hour chat for anybody that may be in need for our services. Our toolbox is available online and for free for any of our major tools that we use in the program, as well as our participants are also able to help and design this program because we are an evidence-based recovery program. We actually come to rely on our participants for useful information for what is effective in their recovery plan. So by doing this, it creates a more balanced and purposeful meaning for those in our participation because they know they're not only getting help for their addictive disorders, they're also contributing to helping others find the path that's successful for them. So a little bit about our history. We were established way back in the glory years of 1994. We are a nonprofit 501c3, so we are volunteer driven. We have over 5,000 volunteers across the United States, but less than 20 employees, and that's including myself. Over 4,000 face-to-face mutual support groups and meetings, with over 250 monthly online meetings that I mentioned earlier. One of the major facts that we are proud of due to the pandemic, many of the resources that those that have been relying on for recovery have been shut down to protect our health issues. Smart Recovery being that we had a basis of an online community, we were able to convert over 600 meetings within the first 90 days to our online platform to make sure that those who had need were still able to reach those resources that they had come to depend on for their recovery. So what is SMART based off of? Well, our fundamental is based off the stages of change, which then relates to our 4-point program. We don't use a linear step system. What we do is we use a program as more of a guide to what you may go through in your recovery lifestyle. So it's building and maintaining motivation, coping with urges and triggers, managing thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, and my personal favorite, living a balanced lifestyle. And I'll get into some more detail about that a little on as we move forward. We are recognized globally about not just with United States government organizations like SAMHSA and NIH, but also overseas with Australia, Canada, and Britain being some of our biggest supporters. Hospitals here in the United States are a big fan of our evidence-based system and use them within their treatment programs. Right here in Ohio, we've partnered with OMAS to work in the psychiatric hospitals that are here that work with behavioral health and recovery. So we are very proud of those facts, as well as we're always growing. The program doesn't just grow with our participants, but with the medical and treatment professionals worldwide as well. So who is SMART a good fit for? Well, you name it. Really, Smart Recovery is very versatile, and that's something that we're very proud of. We are a very adaptable program, because one of the things that we are very proud of is that the program will adapt to the individual. Therefore, the individual will not have to adapt to the program, because we understand that this disease cannot be approached from a cookie-cutter method of recovery. Everyone is different. We may share commonalities in addiction, but how we reach our goals in sobriety may be different from person to person. So we recognize that. So we change our modalities to make it more effective for the group that is using, such as family and friends, courts and corrections, community centers, jails and corrections, treatment centers and professionals, and veterans and first responders. So how SMART is different? Let's get into some of the bases of why we are different. Like I mentioned before, we are an evidence-based secular program. We are created by recovery professionals who are in recovery themselves. So they do have not only a professional aspect of understanding it, but firsthand knowledge of lived experience as well. Based on CBT and REBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, and rational emotive behavioral therapy, which I'll get into a quick detail about that in a little bit, and using motivational interviewing techniques through our facilitators that help guide our meetings. So our facilitators do not dictate or tell our participants what to do. What we try to do is help everyone reach their path to recovery for what best works for them by helping them reach their full potential. And we are an abstinence-oriented program. So let me clarify this because this has been one of the biggest aspects of misconception about our program. We are not a moderation program. I'm looking at the camera right now. We are not a moderation program because this is something that I hear very often because people get confused about, well, why do you say oriented instead of abstinence-based? Well, because we're a program that is very specific. We believe in the power of words. Abstinence-based would mean that every single disorder we do, we tell you to be abstinent from. Well, we handle things other than drugs and alcohol. We are effective for things like gambling, sex addictions, eating disorders, aspects that you cannot totally be abstinent from the action itself. So instead, we teach healthy balances to manage these actions so you do not have to be slaves to the addiction or the morality or the disease that they made approach to. So that's why we're an abstinence-oriented program. But when it comes to drugs, when it comes to alcohol, substances that are foreign, we are completely abstinent-based program towards those. So hopefully that clears up a little bit of misconception for those. Some of the other things that makes us different, we are MAT friendly as long as it is prescribed and monitored by medical professionals. First Amendment adherence, this is a big one that I was very, very adamant about when I became a member of the staff of SMART. We want to make sure that the courts and corrections, not just in the United States, but around the world, know that there are options for treatment. Because as someone who's gone through the correction system knows that when you are mandated to recovery, when you are forced to do something with consequences, the chances of that being sustainable are much lower than when you are given a choice, than what works best for you. So we have been working very hard with the courts and corrections, not just here in Ohio, but around the country, to make sure that these options are available to all that are incarcerated for drug-related crimes. And we are self-empowering. One of the very, 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 very powerful things about our program is we help inspire people to reach that purpose again, to let them know that I can manage this disorder. I can have power over these addictions and make a difference in my life again by making choices that are relevant and rational towards my recovery goals. The self-empowering aspect of this program is something that I personally am very proud of, and it's something that's kept me going throughout my recovery. So some of our position statements, the disease model. Well, we took a survey back in, I believe, about 2018, and about 40% of the SMART participants believe that this is a disease, right? That we are suffering from chronic disease disorder. About 40% didn't. They started arguing about social problems and such and such. Another 20% said, I'm not even getting involved in this nonsense, so just leave me alone. The good news is this program is effective regardless of what you believe, because we are a program based on choice. Depending on how you choose to reach your recovery path is how you use this program. So it doesn't matter what you believe, the program is still effective based on the choices that you make. Same thing with spirituality. Spirituality is not a mandated modality of this program, but it can be used towards your recovery if you're someone that gains strength from your spirituality. As someone who had went through incarceration and was at a very dark time in my life, even though I was raised in the church, I had lost a big aspect of my spirituality. So asking me to believe and to trust and to hope when I was in a very dark place through my clinical depression and at the height of my addiction was very difficult for me to do. This program did not ask me to do that. In fact, it did the opposite of focusing on what I wanted to become stronger. And believe it or not, through an evidence-based program, I was able to find my way back to faith later on and regain that through confidence in myself. Medications, again, as I mentioned, MAT friendly, so as long as it's provided by a medical professional, and we just went through how labels work. For some, labels are very strong. They're powerful. They help us define who we are. For others, stigma, like Sandra was mentioning, is very, very dangerous. It can be degrading and non-helpful for many people by putting us in a box and hindering those who may not understand addiction from seeing all of us. Yes, I suffer from alcoholism. Yes, I suffer from clinical depression, but there is a lot more to me than just that. If that's all you see, you're not seeing all of who I am. So labels can be very dangerous. So that's why we don't discourage, but we also make sure that everyone understands that it is a choice. You don't have to use them if it is not helpful in your recovery. And again, abstinence versus moderation, in my personal opinion, there is no versus. Abstinence is the preferred method because that's the evidence towards it. Those who practice abstinence are more effective in a balanced lifestyle than those who try to moderate suffering from an addiction disorder. So a little bit about how our facilitators are a little different as well. As I mentioned, we are guides, and one of the ways that we do that is by utilizing motivational interviewing and cross-talking. By motivational interviewing, what we do is we learn techniques through our training that help us utilize open-ended questions to keep the conversation moving and to get to the root of the core of what's motivating the individual. Also positive affirmations and summary statements, because when you're in recovery, as some of us will understand, if you're suffering from an addiction disorder, sometimes it's very hard to be taken seriously. Sometimes it's very hard to feel like you're being heard, because a lot of times we may have been dishonest before, and we have lost trust with those around us. So when we come into meetings, sometimes we may have that stigma that not being trusted is ingrained into who we are. So we want to make sure that we're starting to move away from that we are leading towards pathways that we can discover that are helpful for us by doing positive affirmations, acknowledging when we do something well in recovery, and celebrating every victory, no matter how small it is, with something healthy towards your recovery goals is very important in this program to help build that self-acceptance and self-confidence. Obviously, and then using reflective listening as well, because that goes towards being heard, being understood. We want to make sure that our participants' stories and what they are going through is clear and concise so we can help them reach the best path of recovery for their individual needs. Language is very important. Use of I statements is a must in our meetings, okay? And I very, very rarely use absolute statements unless it is something extremely prominent. In this case, I mean it, because that's going to come up next. I want to just make sure I'm not being hypocritical. But the I statements are important, so we learn to take responsibility and accountability for what we are saying, okay? Because this is my story. I am not speaking for all of you. I don't want to speak to all of you, nor can I. Because even though, as I mentioned before, we may share commonalities, you are all individuals, and as so am I. So we need to learn accountability by owning the statements we make by using I statements. As I mentioned before, labels are optional, and the discouragement of absolute statements, like I just mentioned, must, have to, will, also should, could, would. When we use statements like this, we only create one pathway. What happens if that pathway fails for someone in recovery? We have seen very, very detrimental results. So with Smart Recovery, we use statements to change absolutes into options. Example, I have to go to a meeting, as opposed to I choose to go to a meeting. Differences in that statement, both mean the same thing, but the power comes back to the individual by making the choice. I may be mandated to go to a meeting, but it's still my choice to do the right thing. So that puts the power back in my control, from have to choice. So that's something that we do, that we discourage. War stories, drunkalogs, another thing we discourage. Why? Because there's very little progress in focusing on my details of usage. So we discourage them. If you're going to use a lesson from the past, we try to make sure it's relevant to what's going on in our recovery present. And obviously, what I mentioned before, without getting all technical and sciencey, CBT and REBT basically works with how we think, motivates how we feel motivates how we act. And our tools help us manage these aspects of our lives to react and respond better rather than react in our lifestyles. Okay, so some of the, getting a little bit into the point system, maintaining motivation. How we do that is by using some of these CB tools to identify what's important to us. Our hierarchy of values is one of our major tools that we use in Smart Recovery. It identifies what's important in our lives, what matters, what are we willing to fight for. We start using those as the pillars of our motivation to build our recovery statements around. Point 2 is coping with urges, which is very popular in every single recovery program. But some of the things that we do that are very relevant is how to deal with this that can sometimes be misleading to those in recovery. We can learn to dispute our irrational belief system by asking ourselves simple questions when things come to mind that may be hurtful for us. Is it logical? Is it based in fact? And most importantly, is it helpful to me? So by learning tools like this, we learn to start coping with the urges and triggers that may be leading us down the wrong path away from our recovery goals. Maintaining thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Again, using things like unconditional self-acceptance, learning that, yes, I've made mistakes in my life, but that is not the core of everything I must be. Understanding that using absolute statements only provide one path for me, opening up options. So being able to manage things that deal with our thoughts, feelings, and emotions better puts the participant back in control of these aspects of their lives. And finally, my personal favorite, living a balanced lifestyle. This is something we focus a lot on in Smart Recovery because many of us have understood in recovery that it's not enough just to take away the addiction. It's not enough to just stop drinking. It's not enough to just stop shooting up. It's not enough to just stop using. Because for many of us, that incorporated a lot of our lives. So you took that away, now what? What am I doing now with my life? What do I do to fit in? What do I do with my new social groups? Well, we work on that. We learn to enjoy life again, that it is okay to enjoy life in recovery, that it does not have to be just work. We use things like Vital Absorbing Creative Interest, or VACI, which helps us learn new tools, new hobbies, new social networks that are healthy and productive in our new recovery lives to maintain that balanced lifestyle that we've discovered in recovery. So we also have a lot of different concepts within SMART that we use these tools in different types of our program. For instance, we have a friends and families group, okay, because we understand in the core and wellness of those who are suffering with addiction disorders, there are people that care about them, there are people that love them, and they may not understand exactly how to deal with the addiction disorder that their loved one is going through. So these meetings were created for that family member to learn how to do things like use effective communication and learning transparent borders and to communicate without nagging, pleading, or ultimatums. Learning to understand use of their I statements and their self-care can help everyone understand, not just the person suffering from the disorder themselves, but the loved one, that what matters to you is important, right? Because it's very hard to pour from an empty glass. So we learn, we go through lessons to help the family members and those that love them learn about the disorder and how to properly communicate without losing themselves in the loved one's addiction. We have a program for young adults and teens because let's face it, old folks like me, when we talk, not all the young people understand what I'm saying anymore. Slang has changed so much that, Lord, I feel old, and I'm not really that old, but I mean, it's bad. So what we've done is that we've used our tools and techniques and put them in a common language that young people understand, made the tools relevant to their lifestyle. Spiritual and religion neutral is something that resonates a lot with recovery for younger people because they may not be on that level yet that they understand spirituality. So we focus on their needs, like bullying, like dealing with teens that are manipulative or using them for other methods, like relationship struggles that may be leading them towards dangerous uses of alcohol and drugs. Prevention becomes the primary focus for those of our youth and teens so we can stop the problem before it begins. And one of my personal favorites, the Successful Life Skills Program. We've taken our most predominant CBT skills and turned them into a comprehensive 12-week program. This is something that works very well in the recovery homes that Sandra mentioned before, as well as correction and reentry programs, because it teaches the basis about what this program is about and a step-by-step course that can be monitored and surveyed not just by the professionals that be administrating the course, but by the participants themselves to see what resonates truly with their recovery program. This is one that I use personally here in Ohio, and it is very effective. So, my last point that I'm going to make today is about recovery augmentation. My personal standpoint when I make my outreach around Ohio is that we are stronger together, okay? A combination of wisdom found in multiple programs, all right, that can add up to a powerful way to address substance use disorders and negative behaviors. For instance, SMART works very well with 12-step. Okay, another major misconception. We are not against any other program. We're not anti-God. We're not anti-12-step. As a matter of fact, about 40% of all SMART recovery participants practice another form of recovery because they have found that it helps their recovery to augment these tools into things that work. Remember, we are an evidence-based program. If it works, use it. It just makes you stronger. So that's something that I try to make sure that I emulate and articulate every time I do a presentation like this. Because we're not asking someone who's using something right now to give up anything that's working. Use these tools to make your program stronger than it already is, because that is absolutely possible. So, some of the programs besides 12-step that we've worked with, Refuge Recovery, Celebrate, and Dharma Recovery, all have great focal points and strengths. And when augmented with the CBT tools that we use in Smart Recovery for self-management, you just find ways to become stronger. The quote from one of our participants that uses 2 different programs I wanted to put up there so you know it's not just me talking. When I realized that I could use something like SMART's worksheets at the same time I was working the 12 steps, it took my recovery to a better place. Now, it's from a gentleman named Luke. For anonymity, I'm not going to give his last name. But this does work in conjunction with many other recovery programs. As a matter of fact, we encourage it. What works, use it, okay? So our resources can be found online through Tools and Insights, as well as our bookshop and our meeting verifications. If you know someone that is in a program, they can get verifications for their program by online. That they send out a sign sheet from our administrators. Okay. We do online and Zoom training for those who may be interested in becoming a facilitator themselves. We encourage that through our participants because, as I said, we are a volunteer-driven program, and that's where our strengths lie, and that is something we're very proud of. And in conclusion, for everything that I've just talked about and droned on for about a half an hour, you can find all that information right on our website at www.smartrecovery.org, as well as contact me directly there if you have any questions about outreach or smart recovery at mhooper@smartrecovery.org. And with that, thank you very much for listening today, and I'm glad to be here.
All right, moving on to our third and final speaker, I would like to introduce Brent Elegato. Brent is a rising leader who plans to spend his life helping those who struggle with addiction. It was not too long ago that he was actually here as a student at Lakeland. He recently earned his associate's degree and is now pursuing a bachelor's degree in art therapy from Ursuline College in hopes of entering their dual master's degree program in counseling and art therapy. With a past in musical performance, he is no stranger to being in the spotlight and continuously makes an impact on virtually everyone he comes into contact with. And so we welcome you, Brent.
All right. Well, thanks, Jennifer, for the nice words, but I'm actually really nervous to be up here today. This is the first time I've ever done anything like this before in front of a live audience. But Sandra and Michael, I'm really privileged to be sharing the stage with you guys today, so thanks for being here today, and thanks for all the good work you guys do with your respective organizations, not with just addiction, but for mental health as well. Lastly, thanks everybody for coming out today, hopefully to show support, learn about addiction, and help us spread awareness about the addiction in our community. But my name is Brent Elegato, and I am a recovering heroin addict. I was asked here today to speak a little bit about my experience with addiction and recovery, so that's what I'm going to try to do. I'd like to start off by saying that addiction can affect anybody, no matter your race, your sex, your religion, or even your social standings. I actually come from a middle-class family right here in Northeast Ohio, a family of 7. I've got 3 brothers, 1 sister. We didn't actually have everything we wanted, but we sure had everything we needed. But as an addict, I am never satisfied. I always want more, anything and everything. I'm never satisfied. But my first introduction came when I was about 16 years old. I just found out that my older brother was smoking pot, and prior to that, I knew my twin brother had been smoking, but something about my brother smoking just hit me, and I just had to try it, and I needed to. So what made me decide to try it then? It wasn't that I looked up to my older brother. It wasn't that I wanted to be like him. It wasn't even that I thought he was that cool. What it really was is I really thought that me smoking could connect me and my 2 brothers, and we can finally have a way of hanging out. We went to different schools, we hung out with different crowds. We didn't really hang out, and I really wanted to hang out together. Mental note. Human connection is like a huge part of my story, from the time I was using to recovery, even today. So just keep that in mind. But we did connect. We started hanging out all the time. We went to new places. I met new people, new friends, all because we were just smoking pot. Now, some of you guys know me here and some of you don't, but the guys who do know me here, you guys know I'm a social butterfly. I want to talk to people. I don't want to just talk to them. I want to get to know you. If I'm going to talk to you for 5 minutes, I'm going to know your life story, and you're sure going to know mine. But, so you could imagine what it felt like when my introductions to drugs was just human connection. I got to meet more people than I ever have in my life at that point. But I used to think it was just weed that could connect me with other people. Because back then, I used to have standards, right? But once I started smoking weed, I swore I wouldn't do this, I swore I wouldn't do that. But what did I say before? As an addict, I am always wanting more. So as the time went on, my standards started to lower. My standards turned into like, I'll only do naturally occurring substances. I'll never put anything up my nose, and I sure won't put a stick and needle in my arm. But eventually, all those standards were lowered. I broke all those promises to myself. Sure, in the beginning, I didn't make a ton of connections. I made a lot of new friends, and I met as many people as I possibly could, but I only met those people because I was doing as many drugs as I possibly could, with as many people as I possibly could. And somewhere along those lines, my search, my need for human connection, it was lost. The drugs I was using and the activities I was doing, it just became my form of expression. When I was happy, I wanted to go get high. When I wanted to celebrate, I needed to go get high. When I was mad, sad, the only thing I knew how to do was go get high. So my addiction took like a really, really bad turn for the worse a little over 10 years ago. So I had just moved to Asheville with a girlfriend of mine. And mind you, it was in the midst of like the opiate epidemic back then. And me being who I am, I had already been experimenting with everything. So like Oxycontins were a thing. Sure, I was experimenting. Hadn't really done heroin yet, but I was definitely into the Percocets and the Oxycontins. But the girlfriend I was with, we got into a huge fight maybe a month or two after moving to Asheville. She went back home to Atlanta for the weekend, and I never saw her alive again. She died of a drug overdose that night in her sleep, and that was it. I spent the greater part of the next decade battling addiction. I eventually made the jump from Oxycontin to heroin sometime after she passed away because a friend was like, oh, it's so much cheaper. So sure enough, I broke those promises to myself again, and I started doing heroin. About 6 months after she died, I didn't even know how much time had passed. I had just kind of woken up one day and been like, man, I need to stop what I'm doing. My life is a wreck. I don't know where I'm going. My life has just been a cloud. But by that point, I was very, very much physically addicted. Now, for those of you guys who have never been through withdrawal, let me tell you guys something. It sucks. I mean, it is awful. I mean, imagine having, if this might make somebody queasy, but imagine having flu, diarrhea, muscle aches from head to toe. You've got cold sweats followed by hot sweats, right back to cold sweats, all while the feeling of 1,000 fire ants are crawling over your body. On top of that, you can't even get a wink of sleep. Now imagine knowing that you're going to go through this for like a week, but you know how to get the cure. That's what it's like for an addict who's going through withdrawals. Nothing else matters. Every time I got high, I did think about the consequences. I thought about what was going to go wrong, who I was going to hurt, but it didn't matter. I needed to feel better. Because of that, my life was like completely full of like shame and regret every single day for the things I did, for the promises I broke, for the lies I had to make. It's just a vicious cycle. When I was high, all I could think about was feeling better. When I wasn't high, When I wasn't high, all I could think about was getting high. And when I was high, all I could think about was, how am I going to get high the next time? How am I going to prevent myself from getting sick? I became preoccupied with preparing myself of not getting sick. Again, it is nothing but a vicious cycle. But I'm here today because I was able to break free of that cycle. Everybody's path to recovery is completely different, but I'm going to try to tell you how I started my path to recovery. I hit my rock bottom. Before I hit my rock bottom, I did a lot of terrible things. I hurt a lot of people, I lied, I cheated, I stole to get what I wanted. But up until this time, I had little to no consequences. A couple slaps on the wrist, I did a couple nights here and there for jail, but I honestly believe that as a habitual drug user, you kind of get the idea that you're going to see inside of a jail cell sooner or later. So to my mind, spending a night in jail or two wasn't that big of a deal. But my rock bottom was in 2018, I was supposed to be getting married. And about a month before my wedding, I got arrested. And my actions finally caught up to me. They didn't just affect me. I didn't just get a slap on the wrist. I completely started affecting somebody else's life. I basically ruined this girl's life. And she stuck by me. This girl supported me through thick and thin. She stood by me, and that support and that somebody being there for me was the strength that gave me it gave me the strength to begin battling my addiction. That and 6 months in jail to detox and actually really think my life. But my point of this is I couldn't have done this alone. People believed in me. My mother, Jenna, people believed in me, and I couldn't have been able to do it without them. We need others to survive, especially those suffering from addiction and anything else. We just need each other. Human connection again. Super, super important to my recovery and my being. Let me tell you guys a little story. So when I first came back to Cleveland, I was lost. I didn't know what I was going to do. I was just lost. And I went to an Indians game with Jen at the time, and I started having a conversation with the lovely gentleman in front of me and his family. And he was just so outgoing. He started asking me questions, what my story was, and I laid it out to him. I told him I was a recovering addict. I told him I'd like to somehow incorporate, helping people. I told him I was an ex-touring musician. I was like, I don't know what to do, blah, 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 blah. I'll never forget what he told me. He said, that's how stories are made. You need to get back, you need to go to school, and you need to do what you're saying you're going to do. That changed my life forever. Your life can be changed by a talk with a stranger. That fall, I started school here at Lakeland. Since then, I've earned my associates, like Jennifer said. I was president of Lakeland Psi Beta, their honor psychology society. I was also 2021's Behavioral Science Student of the Year. I was Employee of the Year my last year. I just bought a house recently. I have the best girlfriend and friends and family a guy could ever ask for. That being said, let's talk about relationships for a second. During my addiction, I ruined a lot of relationships. I destroyed some friendships. Friends that I've had for over 10 years, I still don't talk to them. But those friends and family members that I've been able to make things right, it's the best feeling I've ever had. I mean, knowing that I could reconnect with someone after all the damage I've done, it was great. But some people, I don't get to make things right. Some people, they passed away from naturally occurring things. Other of my friends passed away from their disease and addiction, and I'll never get a chance to make things right. But even through recovery, I've still lost some friends as well. You grow apart from people, and that's okay, because without my friends I have now, I wouldn't have been able to move on. But I'm going to close up by saying that, if you could take anything away from what I'm trying to say up here, is you're not alone. The person sitting next to you, your friends, your family, they're the most important things. Help is available. I know there's the Lake County Adams Board. I know for a fact that any student here at Lakeland, there are free counseling services at the counseling center. I don't know if you can still walk in, because I remember last year you had to make a call and appointment, but you used to be able to just walk right in. So, don't be afraid to ask for help. Again, you were not alone. I did, and because of you and everybody else and my friends that are around me, I stand here today 3 years, 2 months, and 22 days clean. We do recover.
And while Michael and Sandra are finding their seats, I will add to Brent's story because I heard what he had shared with you for the first time in this past spring. The person he met at the Indians game is a Lakeland instructor. And so I think that's pretty
Sorry,
amazing.
I forgot to mention his name, Ryan Eubanks. Great guy.
All right, so now we have some time for you to ask some questions. I do have some questions as well up here, so I was thinking we could do a mix of questions. I teach abnormal psychology here, and some of my abnormal psychology students, both online and my face-to-face students, did prepare some questions. So I have some amazing questions here. I was really impressed with the caliber of the questions they prepared in advance that I think can generate some discussion. But before I do that, I would like to give you the opportunity to ask questions. And so you can direct your question to one person specifically, or if you just want to throw out a question that anyone can jump in and answer. So does anyone have a question that they would like to ask our panel?
You could call the Compass line. That's at the Lake County Adams Board. It's 440-350-2000. And you'll speak to a triage specialist who will talk to you about your situation, what kind of services you want, what fits you, insurance, and she'll link you up to services. Now, however, we will link you up directly to the services that we contract with, our provider agencies. However, we know about other resources like Smart Recovery, like Premier Health, who are not part of our Adams Board umbrella. But if you're insurance and you're interested, we can still give you a phone number to call. Sure.
Smart Recovery also has resources here in Lake County as well, both face-to-face and online. You can find the information right at the website behind me, including the meeting locations in Mentor that are held face-to-face, as well as the online meeting locations. We understand that not everybody's comfortable yet being face-to-face, so we have made the decision at Smart Recovery, regardless of the pandemic or not, the Zoom meetings will continue. They are now a staple part of our program. So whether you decide to do face-to-face or online, like our program states, it's the power of choice. What you would like to do is up to you. So you can find that information right on our website under Find a Local Meeting. If you click on that, type in where you're living, your zip code, anything like that, and everything within a 50-mile radius will come up and let you know what those are, as well as the details of where and when they're held. You're very welcome.
And let me also add, Sandra had brought, I can't see it from here, some brochures and stuff up here, so please feel free to swing by, and even if you want to talk to them a little bit privately, just making sure you got the number, et cetera, that they are here. Are you a Lakeland student? Yes, I see your sweatshirt that says Lakeland. Welcome to Lakeland.
So I joined the military at 23. For all you youngsters, that was 2001. Something very significant happened in this country in 2001, as most people know. However, I joined in January. So I was put on hold for basic training because they didn't have enough slots. I was going to Kentucky because I was a cavalry scout, 19 Delta. So I had to wait 7 months to go to basic training. So I went to basic training September 23rd, 2001. So it's literally right after 9/11. So as you can, for those that remember those days, and for those that have watched at least one documentary in your life, you understand the tension and the climate of our nation was, in fever. Everyone was riled up. Everyone was ready to go, and it was no different in the military. So when I joined, I was still actively drinking and doing marijuana. But obviously during deployment and during training, those things were called. We had a greater purpose. Purpose is something that can help with this disorder, which is one of the reasons why we focus on that in Smart Recovery. But before I knew about this program, I didn't know. But the focus and drive of serving my country was enough to keep it at bay long enough. Now, however, when I was deployed, we were initially sighted to go overseas to the Sinai, but that mission had changed from active duty combat to Guantanamo Bay Prison Detention Center posting, which for many of us was a huge blow. It was very depressing because we didn't know, being a young man, we wanted to serve. That was something what we wanted to do, and we felt that was more of a custodial job. And unfortunately, on a lot of bases, not just Gitmo, but many bases around the country, for active duty personnel who are stationed that don't have much to do past their duty assignments, there's two things that's in a lot of abundance on a military base: time and alcohol. And that was something that I found out very early on, and I realized that I didn't have to quell my addiction. I found a way to bring that right along with me during my deployment. And because of that, it severely hindered my military career. I could have gone a lot further than I did had I not been in the active throes of addiction. But like Sandra had mentioned, the stigma of bringing up my addiction in the military was very severe, because not only were you feeling like you were outing yourself, but others who may have been suffering from the same instances, even within my own unit. So that was a very, very difficult thing for me to deal with. So rather than deal with the problem, I rode with it and suffered consequences as they came. So that was one of the main motivations about me getting involved with the Veterans and First Responders program that we initiated with Smart Recovery, because I knew there were many people suffering from that. So when we were able to start that, which I started right here in Ohio at the Wade Park VA from Cleveland, we started with the veterans that were working there, and Rich Roches, who is the program director of the Mind Matters group, who I have a presentation with in about 20 minutes. He helped me get that started, and we were able to grow that one meeting to now we hold 4 national meetings across the entire country that are open to any veterans or first responders, including a women's only veterans and first responders meeting that we're very proud of. So I use that experience that I had and that relevance to addiction within my service to turn it into something that others can benefit from and pay it forward. So, thank you.
And thank you for your service as well.
Absolutely. Well, and that's a great question, because again, one of the things, I came from a family that had military experience. My grandfather fought in World War II. I had uncles that were in Vietnam. But in my 20s, my main motivation to going towards the military was I was looking for some sense of purpose. I started to see my life going in a bad direction. I knew I had an addiction issue, but I did not know what to do to deal with it. A lot of that having to do with the fact that I was very young and I didn't know how to deal with the stigma of asking for help. I didn't know how to ask for help. Like Brent mentioned before, asking for help takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of strength to do. And there are many people, especially young people and adolescents, who don't know how to do that. So I was looking for some type of purpose. I had friends that had joined the military, and I thought this would be something that I could do. Hopefully that would help me get my life together. But unfortunately, when I noticed, it worked for a while because the purpose was a distraction, but when the addiction started to rear its head within my military career, it did pose a problem for me personally, because I was afraid to ask for help. Now being in a position where I am supposed to be someone that others can rely on to help them. I am there to serve. I am there to be someone to help others in their times of crisis. How am I supposed to admit that I can't take care of myself? So this was something that was very, very problematic for me as a young soldier, because I did not know how to approach that issue in a safe environment. So it wasn't the military's fault in any case of the world, because there are services that are provided, but the stigma of putting that out there, that I am someone suffering from that when I serve in a unit, especially a combat unit that may have to be in a situation that might be life-saving or life detrimental, it was difficult for me to deal with. So it was hard. It did contribute to me not going forward very early on because of the fear of being labeled as someone who is not effective as a soldier.
All of the above.
The answer is yes. Yeah, no, it really, no, and that really is, like Sandra's saying, we are in dire need. We are outnumbered and we need help. So yes, absolutely.
Never. I never held resentment towards anybody for my drug usage, because even back then, like, I knew I was making that decision. You know, he didn't come to me, like, I just found out through the grapevine that both my brothers were smoking, and I kind of approached them. You know, I kind of put it out to my twin brother, hey man, I heard Brian smokes. If he wants to, let's do this. And then every other, like, barrier that I set for myself, like, I made those decisions. Consciously, willingly, like, I made every choice myself. So I don't have any resentment towards anybody for that. Absolutely. I've actually quit a couple times for a short period of time, however you want to say that. But immediately, like, again, so I spent that 6 months after Ken passed away, like, in a daze. I was just getting high. I was literally doing everything, anything I could, just to numb the pain, just to forget what was going on. Once I realized that I needed to stop doing that, and I realized, you know, my life is a wreck. I had already, at that point is when I wanted to stop, 100%. But it literally took me about a decade to finally fight that battle.
Yeah.
I don't think I was strong enough to say, or at least back then, I didn't have the right support group. So it was always, as soon as I started to go through withdrawals, I was like, I have to go get high. So.
Yeah.
That's a good question. So when I first moved back up here, I was actually going to meetings all the time. When I first moved back up here, I believe I went to a meeting every day for maybe a good 5-6 months, a long time. Finally, when I went back to school, so I was doing the meeting thing, which was really crucial for me to learn how to like interact with people more besides of just getting high. That was really important to me. I started working the steps, but it did for me get to the point where I didn't have time to go to meetings anymore. I was still working full time, and I was started going to school full time. So I was actively, like, I've already made it a point to like hang out with different people. I didn't hang out with the same crowd. When I started working in a restaurant, a lot of people know that that's a very high drug-related business. When I first started working there, I made it very clear, like, I'm not hanging out with you guys, I'm not doing this, I'm not doing that. And I think somewhere along the line, it just became second nature. There are certain things that I know, like, I don't need to be around, I can't be around. Nowadays, it's just ingrained in me that, like, I can't be around certain things, I can't be around certain people. And I don't even know when that happened. Just somewhere over the last 3 years, it was somebody else pointed it out to me. Hey, man, it's really good of you to not go to that place or not hang out with these people or not do that. And that's when I realized, oh, okay, I am actually doing these things that I worked hard for maybe a year and a half to not do. Does that make sense?
Sure.
We'll just go down the line.
Well, I'll start on the micro level first, since that was the first thing mentioned. And one of those things that we do, and that goes back to what I was talking about prevention, is making sure that the information is out there. If you know of services that are available and you have resources to put that information out there, do it. If you're a blogger, if you're somebody who has access to a community board on Facebook or Instagram, put them out there. Put it on your posts on LinkedIn. Those that follow me on LinkedIn and Facebook, those were most of my posts to do. When we created the Smart Recovery Ohio page, we make sure that it's not just about smart recovery. We put anything recovery related that may be going on in the community on those boards. So if you have access to put information out there and you know of services, maybe it's just a meeting in your area, maybe you know of people that want to become volunteers, or maybe there's people that maybe want to volunteer. Reach out, let people know, hey, if you're interested in this, there's services out there that have training programs that we can give back to the community and do something about what's going on in our neighborhoods. So let that information be known. If you have a platform to do it, no matter how small, put the information out there. Like we had just said before, because we need help. So the more people involved in this, we are stronger together. And I've seen that work. And the more people that take passion into letting people know that this is a fight against this disorder, not the individual suffering from it, that we can make a difference. So putting that information out there and making it available to those who may need it is one of the first steps that you can do to your community. So knowing about something like this that you attended today, let people know. Put it on your social media blast. Put it out there. You never know who it's going to touch and who it's going to reach that may literally help save a life.
And I just want to insert this before Brent or Sandra actually answer that question. I'm thinking of your presentation, Sandra. You said, 14 people on average in Ohio now are dying of drug overdoses. I remember not that long ago, 4 years ago, I had someone else from Lake County Adams Board come in and talk to my abnormal psychology students. That number was so much lower. I don't remember what it was, maybe 6, I don't remember. But to think about in such a short span of time, how that number, again, I don't remember the original number, has basically doubled. It's startling to think about. So if either of you have anything to add then to the question I had asked, please feel free to do so.
Yes. Education, support, and connection. Educate yourself. Educate yourself about what substance use disorder is, what behavioral health is, what mental health actually is. From credible resources, debunk myths, educate yourself. And then support one another. Learn the warning signs of substance use. Learn the warning signs of mental health disorders. Learn the warning signs of when folks are struggling, and learn to support one another. There are a variety of folks me being one of them, who gladly talk to you one-on-one, talk to a group about those different warning signs on those different topics and how to approach people in a comfortable manner. Because once we start doing that, that opens the door to conversation and we start talking about behavioral health. Once we start talking about behavioral health, it'll slowly start to destigmatize behavioral health, right? When we start having open, honest conversations without shame, without judgment, and when we are being compassionate towards one another, like you just said. And then the connection piece. Brent talked about connection, and I will say connection is key because we are tribal beings by nature. We need folks in our corner. We need people in our community, whether that's 2 for me, 20 for you. We need each other. So educate yourself on what substance use disorder actually is. Educate yourself on what mental health actually is so that you can debunk the myths, support one another, and build that connection. So when I'm starting to feel a certain kind of way, I don't feel silly going and getting help. I don't feel that I have to keep that from others and I won't have that support. Like you just mentioned, you didn't have a support when you first wanted to stop using. So if you have that support in place because you're able to talk about it, that's going to be huge for folks. So, all right, there's my ramble.
You know, I don't really think I have much to add after what they just said, but I'm a firm believer that it starts with us. You know, everybody sitting here right now, like, you guys took the first step. You know, you're listening to us, me sharing my story, like, we're interacting with each other, like, we are help to killing that stigma of mental health and addiction right here, right now. So I think, you know, this is a good starting point, and if we can just do this with one person, 2 people, and the next, hopefully it grows. And, you know, we can, anybody can walk down the street and see someone having a problem and we can help that person.
Yeah.
I have one more thing to add to that. I'm sorry.
Please,
just
no,
off
please.
of what Brent just said. A survey showed recently in 2020 that folks ages of 14 to 22 years old, when they are battling behavioral health, whether it be a mental health disorder or they're starting to dabble in substances and they're like, oh, am I on the fence? They're not going necessarily to friends and family members and professionals and counselors to talk about it. What they're doing is they're going online, they're going to Instagram, they're looking at blogger sites to see who they can connect with. So again, folks are doing this, which is great in the comfort of their own home and finding that connection online, but we know that connection can be so much greater if we're able to talk about it in person. So let's start opening those doors for this next generation coming up to be adults. Okay.
Yeah, I actually, because that relates to a question that was asked to me directly about family members that have been increasing their drug or alcohol use during the pandemic because of being locked in and because of, not working, having stimulus checks. This is something that comes up a lot. Family members always ask this question because we care. We want to help, right? But just like the young lady just said, if someone's not ready to change, it can be very, very difficult trying to force that person to do so. We've all probably heard of interventions, and yeah, interventions do have a success rate of getting people into recovery, but sustainable recovery, when forced or mandated, like I mentioned before, when incarcerations, those that are coming into reentry programs are mandated to recovery, sustainable recovery, once the program is over, becomes a very, very small statistic. So one of the things that we can do as family members is to make it clear how we feel. Not saying you, not pointing fingers, not blaming, but using those I statements to be very clear about, I am suffering right now because I love you. I am suffering because I want to know if there's more that I can be doing. I'm not doing well. Turning it back towards ourselves and understanding how we are impacted and being able to articulate that clearly and concisely without blame, without ultimatums, without nagging. I want to understand more about what you're going through. What is missing? What am I not understanding? Get the dialogue going in a constructive and objective manner, if possible. That helps. Because a lot of times, what I've seen in my experience, there's a lot of miscommunication and misunderstanding. And there's a lot of blame and there's a lot of stigma that goes towards these issues. And that includes into the family. So one of the ways we can start bringing down those barriers is opening up the dialogue in an objective manner. And that's something that we have seen have more success on a long-term scale when those who make the decision for themselves to enter into recovery, because they get to understand the full picture of how this disorder is not, like Brett had mentioned, not just impacting myself, but the people I care about as well, reminding them of their values, of what they think is important, and how those things that they feel are important are being impacted by their actions, by what you're saying as statements from you. So that's something that we've seen with the Family and Friends program of Smart Recovery that's been effective in those situations.
I would like to add too that when I was going through recovery, sure, I knew I needed help, but was I actually going to get the help when people were telling me? No, absolutely not. I didn't get the actual help I needed till I was ready. And I do think it's important to say, though, too, along this line of questioning, is that you have to take care of yourself, too. There were some of my family members, they drew boundaries. You know, it was tough love, whatever you want to call it. But if they didn't do that, I would have completely destroyed people. So, just, be sure to take care of yourself, too.
All right, well, it is 1:58, and I know Michael's a popular guy today. He has another talk that he's delivering at 2:30, so we are going to conclude this. But by me saying conclude, let this not be a conclusion in that we're just going to go and forget all about this. Again, my hope is that we can just have ongoing dialogue about this so that we can reduce some of that stigma and support each other.
And just to...
And anyone, final thoughts, please, before we wrap up.
To reiterate what Brennan said, thank you all, seriously, wholeheartedly, thank you all for being here. And for whatever reasons made you walk through that door today, thank you. Because just like Brent's saying, this starts it right now. Having those in here listening, for those that are watching on YouTube and other social media networks, thank you. Because your knowledge of what this is about, how to understand it, and how to fight it is going to help save lives. And for those that did send questions, I will send an email answer for everything that was sent to me. So just want to
Oh,
make
wow.
sure
Well,
you
thank
won't
you.
be forgotten. I will bring out the answers to these. So thank you all very much for your participation today. And thank you.